Okay, hiyo, good morning, and welcome to Make Live. I'm Sarah Hall, and we're here at Northeast Library, and this is the amazing Jackie. She found out about this like 20 minutes ago because I want this to be fun. Um, so thank you for coming. Um, Today we're going to be in the makerspace. We have a live series where we explore makers, artists, and creators in action. We'll see how things are made, learn about the process, and take your questions live. So type your questions into the chat just to ask them here in the studio because your questions are what make live happen. So for today's first episode, we're starting with something really special, modern kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken
pottery. I was trying to tell you we're not live streaming. I think we have to. Wait, it is? Oh, it is now?
Streaming. Hello, good morning, and welcome to Make Live. I'm Sarah Hall, and we're here at the Northeast Regional Library, and this is the amazing Jackie, co-host, probably full host, all the personality and all the fun over here. We're here in the makerspace today, and in this live series, we explore makers, artists, and creators in action. We'll see how things are made, learn about the process, and take your questions live. So type your questions into the chat, or if you're in the studio, just ask them because your questions are what make live happen. So for today's first episode, we're starting with something really special, modern kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. This centuries-old traditional art form is both beautiful and meaningful, and we have an amazing guest artist to walk us through it. I'm really excited to introduce to you Jillian Timberlake.
Hi.
Hello. So glad you are here. So if you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us your backstory, and then we'll get into the materials.
All right. Awesome. Well, like you said, my name is Jillian Timberlake. We'll go into the name later. But I am a modern kintsugi artist, and I actually originally kind of accidentally stumbled into this art form. So I wrote a book called Streams of Gold, Finding the Beauty in Broken Pieces. And I wrote this entire book using the extended metaphor of kintsugi because I had heard of this art form, loved this art form. And it wasn't until I finished the book and got ready to decide what I wanted on the cover that I thought I just wrote using this beautiful metaphor, and I've never actually done kintsugi myself. So I ordered a kit and I thought, how hard can it be? And very hard the first time. You don't know what you're doing. But after today, if you want to do some kintsugi, I feel like you'll sail through it. But this is the image on the cover of the very first piece that I ever did. It's a zoomed in image. And I write about the cover, just about my experience with kintsugi. And it really is a beautiful art form, like you said, Sarah, that embraces imperfections. And as a person who leans towards perfectionism, this has become a very therapeutic practice for me.
And where can we find that book?
Of course, you can find Streams of Gold at the Louisville Free Public Library. Along with, I have a second book called Golden Clay that the library also has both copies of those. I actually learned how to do kintsugi by checking out library books, believe it or not, and kind of self-teaching through that. And so the library has lots of great resources on that. The books are also available at some local stores here on Amazon and on the website.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So let's just do, there's a lot of stuff on this table. So let's just, can you walk us through what you have at this table?
Sure. So as far as materials go, kintsugi is typically done on broken ceramics. So sometimes I find ceramics that are already broken, porcelain, vases. I do custom commissions for people who have like a keepsake that means something to them and is broken. But oftentimes I find that it's really therapeutic to just find something that looks fine and okay. But our ideal is that like this vase is perfect. And yet once you see by the end of it, what kintsugi can do to a piece, I think there's something really cathartic about breaking the piece yourself and just kind of letting go of control. You don't get to control how it breaks. So typically you're going to work with ceramics. Now I have also spread kintsugi to be able to do lots of different things. So I have a kintsugi table at my house, and I, sometimes do kintsugi jewelry, and anything that you can break, you can kintsugi. Traditionally, you're going to deal with ceramics. I also have a hard surface. So we're using a brick today to break this on. And then you're going to want some sort of either canvas bag, paper bag, something to wrap it in. Sometimes I even do bubble wrap just so that it has a less of a chance of shattering, okay, to cushion it. You also want a non-slip and non-stick placemat, okay, because you certainly don't want the adhesive to glue to your table surface. A pair of gloves to protect your skin as you deal with the adhesive. The adhesive that we're using today is this 2-part epoxy. So it's equal parts resin and hardener. This is what we use in modern kintsugi. In traditional kintsugi, there's an adhesive called urishi that they tend to use. And this comes from the sap of a tree, of a Japanese tree, but it's a member of the poison ivy family. So lots of modern kintsugi uses an alternative adhesive in place of that.
Have you ever used that?
I have not used that. People often have allergic reactions to it. Once it cures, there's no allergic reaction. So if you are using that as in traditional kintsugi, you definitely want to make sure you have the proper wear. And then I also have some gold mica powder, a mixing dish, and a craft stick. So all of these components we're going to mix together. As far as cleaning up the pottery, you're going to want acetone, a razor blade, some cotton swabs or cotton balls for cleaning up. I always have ceramic glue on hand for tricky pieces that might not adhere necessarily with the 2-part adhesive. And then as far as finishing it off, while we do put the gold base in, I like to add a finishing layer over the top. And so you have lots of different options for what you're going to use for that. In traditional kintsugi, you're using 24 karat pure gold. And I do that on a lot of custom commission pieces, or I have certain pieces that I will use the 24 karat pure gold. When I'm going to do something like this today, that's going to have a timetable on it, I tend to use a gold substitute or alternative, like a liquid gold leaf. Gives you a really metallic sheen, or you can use a 24 karat gold acrylic paint. You can put those on with precision bottles, which is what I like to use, or you can have a paintbrush on hand if you like a thicker line, or if you have a steadier hand. So I think that's most all the materials. I also do have packing tape on hand because sometimes you start to stick to the pottery, and so you just need something that you can kind of wrap it up, mummify it, and just let it set for a while.
And most of these things, did you order online, get locally?
Both. Because I do this so frequently, I order a lot of my supplies in bulk, but everything here you could get, you could get at a local store, you could get it online. The hardest things probably to find are the mica powder and the liquid gold leaf, but you can get those at any craft store as well as online.
Don't forget, audience, if you have a question, yes.
Can you tell the difference between the gold and gold?
That's
So-
a great question.
Just so online can hear, you're asking, can you tell the difference between the gold and the gold leaf
Visually?
visually?
See the difference.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as far as using the gold mica powder dust versus the 24 karat pure gold dust, you really can't tell a difference. To the naked eye, they look almost identical. So I have to, when I'm using the 24 karat gold, obviously that's going to increase the value of the piece. So you always kind of have to make note of what you're using. Those really don't affect it aside from the value of the piece. Now the liquid gold leaf does have more of a, some people will say it looks more rose gold, and it definitely has more of a metallic sheen to where it almost looks more metal. And so, yeah, there's a slightly different look with the gold leaf. Good question.
So do you choose sometimes like gold leaf versus like gold when it comes to like the pottery, like to match the tones better?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes there's already gold rimming the, the pottery. So I try to find a gold metal that will, match that or coordinate with it. I've also had people hire me to do silver. You can also do kintsugi using platinum. And then, yeah, you can pretty much use, it's typical kintsugi is going to be a metallic of some nature. So I've done silver. Gold typically looks really good. I chose this blue vase today because a lot of Japanese pottery is this darker blue and gold stands out really well against it.
Okay. Are we, so is there a step before the breaking or?
You take a deep breath.
Okay, audience.
Well, like you can get your own private group together, and I also do like corporate workshops, and so it's funny because the group is usually split in two types of people. People who are like, when stop talking, when are we gonna break it already? Okay? And then there's these people that go, I can't do this, I can't do this. So it's always fun to see when people come up. You'll see some people that are just ready. You know, when I did the Collider residency with the library, you know, I had people that were ready to like chuck it and just,
Yeah.
you know, they were like, this is a rage room, but it's not a rage room unless you love a million piece puzzle. And I had other people that would like barely like, you know, you gotta get like the Frozen soundtrack, like let it go. So yeah, what I found generally as far as bases go, so also the pottery helps me know how to break it. So if I'm gonna break a plate or a bowl, a dish, I'm often gonna wrap it in, you know, the burlap sack and use a hammer. And I'm gonna hold it with one hand and I'm gonna strike it. Okay, because if you put it against the surface and then you hit it, it's probably gonna shatter. It's too much, you know, pressure on the whole surface. Now with a vase like this, I have found that the best way to break it is to hold it sideways and drop it, okay? Because what happens often is if you do it upright, it's going to either shatter or it's gonna like split straight down the middle and you just won't get a lot of cracks along the side, okay? So
This is like shatter math.
shatter math. There's some physics in here that I don't know. So oftentimes I will go about, you know, shoulder height and I'll drop it. Are you all ready?
I'm
Yes.
ready.
All right. I'm ready to hold my breath.
That looks like a lot of pieces.
You never know. Okay, so you typically will end up with some larger pieces. Okay, so you feel good about that. Take that out.
Yeah.
But then what happens, also based on the vase size, is you end up with like all these tiny little pieces. And even tinier than these are these little shards. So these little shards are not going to go back in. Okay, so this actually, like if we had more than an hour, I would totally be able to put this one back together. But just like a good cooking show, you know, where you put the casserole in and then out it comes.
Yes.
I had a feeling that this might break into a few more pieces and you're going to want to watch me put together. Also, as I'm talking, you know, and looking, I'm probably not going to be a great conversationalist if I'm having to go, shh, listen, like, let me try to put these together. So the other part of this is once you break it, you think you're ready to put it back together, but you are not ready to put this back together yet. Okay. And I think this is very telling of our own human tendency. You know, we don't feel so comfortable with this. Like this makes us uneasy, or at least it makes me uneasy. And I'm just ready to start like, what can I do? How can I fix it? But there's two important parts that you need to consider before you move from breaking it to starting to put the process of putting the pieces back together. One is you really have to take inventory of your pieces, okay? Because while a piece might look like it is intact, upon closer look, you will find often hairline cracks, okay? And if you're gonna put the piece together, you really want all of those breaks to be fully broken because they can't fully heal until they are pulled apart. Okay. Now there are some methods for where you can just fill in the hairline crack without breaking it apart, and that's fine. They just have to be tended to. You don't want to miss those. So often I'll take it out into natural light and make sure I can see if there's any cracks. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is that while I could piece these back together, pretty, you know, I could piece these back together. It makes for a more beautiful artistic piece if instead of these sitting together like this and looking just like cracked pottery, if I create a vessel for the gold to lay. And so that's gonna give us a better aesthetic look. So what I will do is I will by hand sand down every piece, okay? Sand down the edges so that I create a groove, so that when they do come together, there's a real good clean line for the gold to fit in, okay? So what I've already done is the same vase over here, okay, that I broke last night. And this one, there were hairline cracks on several pieces that I had to end up breaking fully. And then I've also taken sandpaper and just by hand shaped it down. Okay. All right, so that's the breaking. All right.
So are you, when you were talking about this vessel shape, are you going to walk us through that step? Or did you, like
the
when you're
vessel.
sanding, creating the vessel for?
Oh, yes.
the
So
gold.
creating the vein for it to fill in, that is me sanding these edges down.
Are you sanding
So
at like a 45 inward?
Yes, pretty much. And I'm only usually sanding the outside because that way the inside is going to be fully intact pieced together. But this outside you can, well, I don't know how you can see there.
Let's
But-
see if I can switch I have a
You can-
close up.
But you can even see there, like
Mhm.
there's a groove. And so this is going to allow, essentially what it's going to allow to happen, and you don't have to do the sanding piece. You could just put them back together. What's going to happen with that is that when you apply the gold, it's just going to be raised a little. And some people really like that look. I prefer a flush look where when you can see the gold line, but when you run your finger over it, it just feels completely smooth and completely combined.
And
Okay.
what grit of sandpaper? Or is it several?
Whatever grit I have on hand. That's a great
It's not
question.
technical.
If I'm impatient, I'll get a really coarse sandpaper, or if it's really jagged pottery. But that's more of like a patience issue than it is that really is the best. You could use a coarse or a more fine, just how much muscle grease you want to put into it. Okay. All right. Are we ready to start putting together? Any other questions?
So,
Yes. Yes.
So
we
I'll
are
just,
breaking-
let me just make sure.
Oh, thank you.
Just asking if there are any safety precautions, measures to take in the breaking
and
and
then when you
in,
get into ventilated area.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So for breaking, I didn't demonstrate very well, but you should be wearing probably protection so that if the pottery were to come out, which that has happened before. But usually when it's closed in a container, it's not flying everywhere. But sometimes I'll forget, like I'll have glasses on hand, and then if there's a hairline crack, I'll put the glasses on, and then I'll take the hammer for the hairline crack and I'll just kind of knock glasses off of that. As far as the adhesive, yeah, you want to be in a pretty well ventilated space. Also, when I do workshops, I always provide masks because some people don't care for the odor of it. And also, if you're using a lot of mica powder at a certain point, and certain methods, I brush that mica powder on, and then that creates like a lot of smoke plumes. And so in that case, I'll put a mask or a respirator on. I tend to, the going outside is a tricky bit because your adhesive has to be in a climate controlled area to dry and to cure. So you can't just go outside depending on humidity, and it's Kentucky. And so it just kind of depends on what the weather's like. Sometimes I can do it outside. Other times I'll throw on a mask if if I feel like I'm not in a place. But it just kind of depends on your tolerance. Great question. Okay. All right. We ready to put it together?
Yes.
All right. So, anybody like to do puzzles?
I think we have a puzzle swap this weekend.
Well, then this might not be the room to admit that I despise puzzles. Go figure, right? How ironic. And so, as you're putting this together, again, with the taking inventory, as you're looking at the pieces, you also want to go ahead and pre-plan how are they going to go together and which pieces make sense to put together first. I tend to start with the foundation, okay? So the one that I just broke a minute ago, I'll bring over here. And like these two pieces, I can tell are the base. These two pieces are the base. So I'm going to start with those, okay? Because you want to work on your surface. What I learned when I put that first piece together, that was the front of the cover that was quite disastrous, was I was trying to hold the pieces like this, you know, with my hands, thinking it was steady. Well, you're making all kinds of micro movements. And so that's just pulling it apart. So you don't want to do that. If you put it on the mat, it is going to stick to the mat. That's okay. Let it stick to the mat. Don't try to pull it off between piecing, you know, different things. All right. So once you have an idea of knowing where some pieces are going to go, so I'm going to start with this, you know, these first two big pieces and build on the foundation. What I had mentioned earlier about the puzzle lovers. So if you like to do the perimeter of the puzzle and then you like to pop in the last piece, that's the worst strategy you could use for this art form, okay? So rather than building around, you want to build up and on top and, you know, side to side instead of doing a, you know, if you have pieces together and then say that, you know, you start to box yourself in and there's a piece that'll go here, you won't be able to pop this piece in, okay? Because for this piece to go in, it really needs to go in from the top and fit flush, and then you can stack the next piece on. So the only reason you're gonna want to like leave a gap knowingly is if you actually wanna leave a piece out, or if a piece shattered and there's not gonna be a way for you to put it back. Okay, so the first step, and this is gonna be the step that we repeat. You've got your tray, your mica powder, your two-part adhesive, and your craft stick, all right? You're going to want to dispense equal parts of the adhesive into the tray. Now, little tip, when you get a new syringe like this, oftentimes this yellow glue won't come out quite as fast. So I didn't get even amounts there. So I'm not going to use that batch, okay? Or else it will not adhere. It won't end up curing. So just go to the next well, you get equal amounts, okay? And I usually try, when I do workshops, I say do like a nickel amount because this has a 5-minute dry time. So if you put too much in here, it's going to harden before you even get to use it. Now, for the purpose of today, we're working a little faster. So I did a little bit more, okay? And then you're going to take your gold mica powder and you're just going to take a very small amount. I mean, not much at all. And you're just going to dump it in and you're going to mix this real thoroughly, okay? Now, fun fact, you need both parts of the two-part epoxy. I know that feels like that would be obvious. However, when I did my first piece, I kind of glanced over the instructions and I looked at this, you know, I looked at this glue and I thought, I want a clean, crisp, you know, adhesion. I don't want this yellow stuff. So I only cut open this is probably not the time to admit this, but now I feel like, you know, I've learned my lesson. I cut open only the clear side and used that. And of course, it did not adhere together. I got out the box fan. I had it on the highest setting. I was like Lamaze-like vigor on the backside, blowing on my piece of pottery, while of course I was holding it up like this, making micro movements, and it would not adhere. So it took far too long before I called upstairs for help, and my husband came down and said, why are you not using both components? So it's super important that not only do you use both components, but that you use equal amounts. So if you start to do it and it's not drying, it's probably because you didn't get quite an equal amount. All right, as far as applying the adhesive, you are going to apply it on one edge that's going to make contact with the pottery, okay? So I don't have to put it on this piece of pottery and on this piece of pottery. I just need to put it along one edge.
And do you have a recommendation for which, or does it change?
Does not matter.
Okay.
Does not matter at all. And so for this one, since this guy's already down here, I'm just going to apply this, and you want a generous amount. You don't necessarily want so much that it's going to drip everywhere, but it will ooze out of the edges when you put them together. Okay, so you're going to spread that evenly. Show the edge here. Okay, and just make sure it covers the edge. One other tip is that sometimes we think we're we're putting the epoxy all the way to the edge, but we kind of stop, like we go like this, but make sure that you get that tip end of wherever you're applying, okay?
And that was just like one light coat.
Yeah, just enough to cover. Push it on, you want to make sure it's lined up really well. All right, now I still have enough epoxy to go ahead and apply the next piece. So I'm just going to keep working until this epoxy starts to dry up. Okay, so this piece is going to fit about there.
Are you ever in a situation where you're just holding a piece till it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will be in that situation very shortly. Okay.
How long do you usually wait before you like lay down the epoxy and then like put a piece on? Is it immediate or do you have to wait
It's
until
pretty-
it's tacky or something?
No,
along those
it's
lines?
pretty immediate. So once you stir that epoxy up and you get it really well mixed, you want to go ahead and apply it because within 5 minutes, it's going to be rock hard in this tray and you won't be able to use it. So as I'm working, especially like humidity, room temperature, if it's really hot, then it's going to get tacky faster and you're not going to have as long to work with it. And I can already feel it kind of getting tacky. So I'm towards the end.
And does it get hot? Is it? Does this a
I don't
heating
notice-
kind of?
I don't notice that it gets hot, but I also am trying really hard not to touch it.
Yeah.
Because then I'm just going to smear it everywhere. So you can see here,
I can see
like
that.
there is excess that has dripped off here. I'm not going to try to clean that up right now. Okay, I'm just going to leave it. But that's a good amount because it means that it's, I have sealed those lines. So there's enough. If you put such a small amount on there that you don't see anything starting to come to the surface when you press them together, that probably means you don't have enough
Okay.
adhesive on there. Okay, now I'm out of adhesives here. Okay, so I'm going to just start a new little pod. Okay, the other thing, patience is really key here. So you'll see like the air bubbles rising. You want to make sure those get out of the way so that you're not just pushing air into the tray and not getting an even mixture. Okay. All right. So I may not have waited quite long enough with that one because I'm see how it's uneven between the two. So I'll just go to the next one. If I had been more patient and actually done what I advised, let it done. So, all right, and then a little bit.
And you're just doing like the end of that
Just
stick?
the end of the stick.
Okay.
Okay. What you risk if you put too much mica powder in, it's not going to spread well. So you mix it up really well. Now, if I had had more adhesive in that other one and I went back and it was like gummy, I would have stopped using it at that point and started a new fresh batch. All right, so now that this is mixed up, I can continue to apply the pieces. So this guy is going to go right here. Now here's where I have to make a decision. This is a good example of like the puzzle lovers wanting to pop in a piece. If I were to put this here, I cannot put this other piece in here yet.
Oh no.
So if I want to put that piece in, I need to go ahead and do this one and then this one. But I love leaving a piece out of pottery. It's my favorite thing too. So we're going to leave that one out. Okay. And you might think like, oh no, this is not going to go well because it's going to bother you. But at the end, I think you'll see that you have a much more beautiful piece because of all the pieces that I do. Like I'll be at St. James whenever that's at the beginning of October, the first weekend of October, in just a couple weeks. And I will tell you, my pieces that sell at St. James the fastest are the pieces that are the pottery that are missing pieces. One, you can truly tell it's broken. Okay. And two, I think there's just something really encouraging about an incomplete piece that's still beautiful. Like it's not finished yet, but it is still worth celebrating, even if it doesn't have all the pieces. And so people tend to resonate with that. And I just think aesthetically it makes it look.
Yeah, you're really
Cooler.
moving it from the utilitarian
Mhm.
to more of just the art.
The artist. And if you leave a missing piece out up at the top, if you seal these really well, they can hold water. Okay. So this adhesive will be fully cured in 24 hours. Okay. So you can do a water test if you want it to hold water. And if you have filled the gaps in completely, then it should hold water. So even if you leave a gap, say for a vase, as long as that gap is above your water line, then you're not going to have any issues with it.
So I do have a question from our chat, and they're asking if you could use UV resin versus the two-part epoxy resin.
That is a good question. I believe you can. I have not had much experience with UV resin, but I have just looked into it, particularly for making like coasters. So coasters have been a really popular. Coasters are a great place to begin because they're a flat surface. And usually you're not dealing with all the angles. And so I was actually looking into using UV resin to kind of harden those up, but I have not gotten further than just researching it. But yes, there's no reason why you couldn't use it.
You mentioned coasters as like a good first project. Are there other materials that you think make good starter projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something with like a small break, if you have a bowl that just chips, that is usually a good place to start just on something small. Believe it or not, vases, maybe not a vase this big, but like small vases. So when I do workshops with groups, we use like a 4-inch vase, and the vases actually are pretty easy to put back together because you often have support from that 3 dimension versus if you do a flat plate, that plate, while you think of it as flat, it might have rounder edges that you're having to hold. And hold steady to where you can't use the base of the table or the placemat as much. So small vases, coasters are nice and flat. Those are probably the two things I would say to start with, or something that just has a small chip out of it.
Nice.
Okay, so we're getting to the top here, which you might be thinking like, okay, I thought this was supposed to be really beautiful, but this just looks real tacky. So this is the part that I call the messy middle, okay? Also a part, just like over here with the broken pieces. In general, I find, myself included, we're not usually very comfortable with this part of the process.
Trust the process.
Yes,
Trust
trust the
But
process.
we're used to, we're used to social media speeding things along and time-lapse videos and, a whole house remodel in an hour on, a home network, which is really fun to watch, but it makes you feel like you're really inefficient when you're the one doing the renovating. And so I always like to reassure people that this is what it's supposed to look like. Okay. So just like in metamorphosis, when you think about a caterpillar crawling into its cocoon or the chrysalis forming around it, okay, we know a butterfly, we know something beautiful will emerge from it. But if you were to break open that chrysalis before the process is done, you're just going to find a liquefied caterpillar and a lot of goop and a lot of mess. And so if we stop here and we start to say, this is not turning out, I give up, then we miss the beauty that will emerge. But you just have to trust the process, like you said. Okay, here's the last piece. Okay, this is the cathartic part here to push this in. And you can tell it's going to have trouble going in. So I'm actually doing these last two pieces at the same time so that I don't lock it out. Okay? All right. So
Great.
ta-da, it's all back together.
Yay.
But it's still kind of, it's not much to look at. So what a lot of people don't realize is this gold mica powder I use. This is not your final look. It's just a foundation. It's just a base to be mixed in with the adhesive. Okay, there's a few different methods for how you can apply the gold, but we're not going to apply it yet. Okay, now, if we weren't on like this, cooking network show where we have time, I would just leave it. That's what I would do. I would leave it for probably, an hour. And then what I would do is come back, maybe even longer than that, maybe 2 hours. It just depends on how much excess adhesive you have. If you have a lot of excess adhesive, it's going to take a little longer. So if I weren't in a rush, I would just leave this and come back, and then I would take a straight razor blade and I would just scrape off the excess once it's dried, because it'll harden, so it'll just chip right off. Okay. Now, if you're trying to do this kind of in one sitting, then what you're going to do is you're going to get acetone. All right. And you could leave your gloves on. I find it easier to work with gloves off for this part. And you're going to soak the acetone in on a cotton ball. Okay. And then you're simply going to, let me find a good spot to demonstrate this. You're simply going to run this along the lines. Okay. And you're probably thinking like, oh no, it's taking all the glue off. But remember, the adhesive is in the lines. Okay. So what we're doing is we're just taking off the excess that's on the outside. Now, sometimes you have a lot of adhesive, in which case, once I soften it with the acetone, I'll take the razor blade and I will just scrape off that excess.
Oh, that looks really satisfying.
It's very satisfying. And I use this like a shovel. Okay. So like I'm not scratching it up. I don't want to scrape the pottery, but I'm just kind of scooping off the excess. All right. Scooping off the excess. And then I'll come back with acetone and I'll, circular motions, kind of clear it off. And when it's still wet and tacky like this, it comes off pretty easily with the acetone. Okay. So you're just cleaning up. If you've got fingerprints all over this from where, you were handling it, the acetone will wipe that right off. Okay. Now it's still going to feel a little tacky to touch, and that's okay, because again, that full drying process takes 24 hours.
And is this the same process for different types of materials that you would put together?
It is. The only difference, the process is the same. Now, if you wanted to do something that were food safe, okay, so this is for decorative use only. But say that you had a dish that you wanted, like a platter that you wanted to be able to use, there are specific food safe epoxies that you need to make sure that you're using with that. And with those, I will make sure they sit the whole time to cure before I use any kind of like acetone to clean up, just to make sure I'm following the specifications with those. But it's still the same cleanup, take off the excess, and it's pretty much the same process. Now it's going to start to get goopy as it dries more, which means you might just need more acetone. Okay. Any other questions?
Are you normally listening to music or doing something? You weren't chatting your way through this process?
So are you normally listening to music? What's your vibe while you're crafting?
I'm often listening to audiobooks. Okay, that's a big thing, or music. If I'm making a big batch of pottery, I usually will want some upbeat music to kind of keep me going. If I'm working on one piece, particularly to me, the most meaningful pieces that I do, that tend to take most of like my full concentration are these butterfly pieces. Okay.
Yeah, I can
That
zoom
might
in.
be better for that. Are these butterfly pieces? And so with these, I always leave out a missing piece, and in its place, I put a butterfly. Okay. And these were designed to be memorial pieces. And so to commemorate loss of a loved one, some people have put their own application on these, which I love, which is, maybe it's just a changing season, or maybe it's a new accomplishment or a new phase of life. So when I'm doing something like this, I actually want like calmer music. I'm more reflecting of who am I doing the piece for? What's the story behind the piece? And sometimes I don't know the story. And so it's more of me just kind of like thinking about like, this is going to end up somewhere and I don't have to know the story, but like, it's just cool that there's this connection between the artist and the receiver, that it's not just me making art, but that this art only means what it means based on the person who receives it and their interpretation of it. But yeah, music, books, or sometimes just silence. It can be really nice just to have
When you're listening to like positive, upbeat music, are you like, this one's gonna be a fun one? I'm gonna use so much gold. You just get ready. I wanted to have all the broken pieces.
Sometimes, I really have to listen to the upbeat music. There was a huge vase that I did, and I was like, I'm gonna post this, and it's gonna be great. And I imagined, it was black and white vase. It had like a black and white floral print on it. It was a white vase with black flowers, and I went outside and dropped it on the concrete in slow motion, like on the video. And I was like, it's just gonna like hit, and it's gonna, slowly break apart, maybe into like, 6 pieces. That's what I was hoping for. And of course it like almost shattered, but it was way too pretty of a vase for me to be like, well, I'm not just putting that together. So I came in and I had to find some really happy music to push me through that one. And then, of course, I can time lapse me putting it together, and it looks like, those
Awesome.
does that just like went together. And that one had a lot of gold on it, a lot. And it really was beautiful, but I had to put a lot more work into that one, which is why when you see pieces that have more breaks, more cracks, the value is going to go up of those pieces because the time is in them. They also have more gold if I'm using 24 karat gold on those. They are more beautiful in a certain way because there's just so much gold on them. And one of my favorite parts about kintsugi that I don't think we have talked about, it's actually my favorite thing, is that you would think looking at a vase or a piece that has been broken and put back together, like you better be very careful with that. Like it is fragile now. Like put it up on a high shelf, be very careful with it. But the reality is that even once this piece cures and it is fully dry, it's actually stronger than it was before it was broken. Because now all of these edges are fortified. All of these places that were once weak are now strong. And so that to me is, it's a beautiful metaphor and representation and parallel with resilience and just the human spirit, the things that are hard for us. Maybe we wouldn't wish them on ourselves or on anyone else, but they do often end up being the things that we find some strength in, and that we become stronger. And so I have had vases that I've put completely back together, all that gold, and then I set them to the side to dry them. And I kind of forgot they were there. And I can remember 2 specific occasions. And one, I knocked my elbow against a vase and it fell on the floor. And it had been repaired and it did not break. It did not break. Like, I did good on that one. It's strong. I mean, I read that, but is it really strong? Or do we know that? Am I going to test it? I'm not going to drop my vases on purpose. And so the second one, the way that it fell, it did break. But it did not break in a single place that it had been repaired before. And so that one taught me that even though, these intact pieces might appear really strong at one point, that those are places that might be more likely to break, but then the places that were originally weaker in the structure have now been strengthened and fortified. And so they really are stronger. And so those vases, I say those are double kintsugi. And so as I put them together the second time and I start to calculate up, how much gold is in that and how much glue and how much time, they also become more valuable, but they also become more beautiful.
Double kintsugi. I like that.
I want to see a triple kintsugi. Just keep dropping it and see how many times you can break it. Yeah.
Perfect. Infinite kintsugi. All right. So I
question?
Pretty much got this cleaned up. Yeah. What's your question?
Yeah, so how much thought goes into picking out, like the holes and the creation of what the end result will look like.
That's also a very good question. So sometimes you can't really control how it breaks. So sometimes when it breaks, it's almost like one of the, what do they call the psychology blobs? Like the roar.
Rorschach.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what do you see? And so often when I do workshops and people leave out a piece, and we always I also do grief workshops are one kind of line of workshops that I'll do because this is a really great beautiful model or representation of grief. And a lot of people will say like, look, it looks like a heart, or, oh, this looks like, and people see their own meaning. So I can't necessarily control how it breaks, but when I pick out which piece to leave out, it can't be a big, huge foundational piece, it's often one of the smaller pieces. And sometimes, I'll look at how does that interact with the rest of the piece. And so like when I was deciding on this one, I could have left out a piece down here, but you really wouldn't have seen it as much. So by leaving out this top piece, it kind of is going to frame it as a central focal point. I also do what I call kintsugi. Okay, so instead of kintsugi is Kin sugi. So kin in Japanese means gold, and sugi means to bring together. Okay, so you can see where the meaning and the name come from. But since we live in Kentucky, I thought it would be fun to do Kent Sugi, like Kentucky Kintsugi. So it's Kent, okay, Kent Sugi. And on those, I actually do have holes that are left with the silhouette of Kentucky or with the fleur-de-lis for Louisville. And those, of course, I don't just drop them and say like, be Kentucky. But there's a process before where I draw it on. My husband helps me, we etch it out. Sometimes we will engrave it. Other times we will drill it all the way out to where it's the missing piece. And then after that, then I will break the piece of pottery and put it back together so that the breaks are also overlapping with the state. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay. All right. So now that this is pretty cleaned up, here is the problem. You don't really see much gold, okay, because I've cleaned it off. So what we're going to do at this point is decide what look do we want this to have, okay? Do we want it to have this, this gold look here, okay, with these gold lines, okay? This is with the gold, the liquid gold leaf, all right? Or do we want, if I wanted to put 24 karat pure gold on there, I could do that. But thank you. So this is an acrylic finish. Okay. So you can see, I don't know how well you can see, but like this gold leaf is a little more metallic. This one is a little more yellowy with a sheen. And you'll notice this one, if you pay real close attention, it's not just a piece of broken pottery. Here's one piece of pottery from one vessel. Here's more pottery from the original bowl. And in the middle is a third piece of pottery.
It's like a quilt.
It's like a quilt. So this is actually called yobit sugi. All right, yobit sugi. And that is where you take more than one vessel and you put them together. So say you have a piece that shatters and you don't want to leave a gap, then you can merge a new piece of pottery into that. You can also take, there's certain materials where you could like rebuild. So say that, say this piece that we left out had shattered and we want to rebuild it, then we could put that in. I just think it looks better, or it accomplishes something different just to leave the gap. Okay. So for today, we can use, I don't know, what do you all want to use? Do you all want the liquid gold leaf or do you want the yellower, more traditional gold?
Yellower. Yeah, I feel like it's gonna show.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
with the blue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Smart choice, audience.
Okay. Interactive.
Right?
Live is, right? Okay, so you can either paint it on, which is gonna probably give you a thicker line, or you can use a real thin brush. What I found to be the best is to use these precision bottles that have a precision tip in them. And so you get a real clear, fine line.
I
with
see you
this.
kept a pin in there.
Yeah, the pin is in there so that it hopefully doesn't get clogged, okay? Which sometimes these are a little temperamental, okay? And then the precision tip looks like a pin, but you don't want to take that out or else you're just gonna have, blobs of paint everywhere, okay? So this is a permanent alternative gold acrylic paint that's gonna go over the top. And let's see really well.
You can move.
There we go. All right. So this is the most stunning part, and it's also the easiest part for you to simply trace the lines. If, like I said, this doesn't get clogged, this might make our decision for us, which one we use. So usually keeping the pins in does keep them clear, but sometimes they're just a little temperamental. Okay. There it comes. Okay. So you're just going to squeeze it out and you're going to go right over the line.
Looks like you need a steady hand.
You do need a steady hand. Now, at this point, it is probably secure enough to turn over on its side. Okay. And you're just going to trace along the line. Okay. This usually takes about 20 minutes to dry, depending on how thick you make the line. Okay. And so you simply trace over the lines and it will really finish the piece off. Thin lines, you can do thick lines. Okay.
So at this point, if you make a mistake, you can just wipe it off
Correct.
with the acetone or
Yeah, with the
okay.
acetone is what you would do. And then I want to come over on this side and just show you. So when you have this gap, what I have found to be the best way to frame this in is where I could have applied the glue to stick that piece. That's just white right now. So that doesn't look really great. So I go ahead and I add some of the gold in there. Okay. On all the edges. But then that really doesn't frame that missing piece all that well. Okay. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm also going to want to trace an outline right along the edge. And that will frame it really well.
That looks beautiful.
And you can always go back and clean it up. You know, typically I'm going to take my time on this and I'm going to go a little slower than I'm going right now. But you essentially just want to cover the lines and highlight all the cracks.
You said that this was one of the easier parts.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite part, I should ask, of like the whole process?
I guess easier with this part, I would say this is the faster part. Because everything else does require such patience, which this still requires patience, but I feel like I think this is my favorite part because you get the satisfaction of actually highlighting all of the cracks. And so for me, like I said, this art, it's beautiful, but it's also meaningful. And the reason that I love it so much is kind of its countercultural, you know, there's this illusion of perfection that I think we all kind of feel the pressure, specifically maybe females a little bit more, of holding things together. And I think that kintsugi is beautiful, and maybe this is another reason that I like to leave out these pieces, because when you see this, you still can see that it is valuable and that it's beautiful, but it also isn't perfect and it's in process. And so what I never really understood until one of my children taught me this was the original word perfect. It actually in Latin, it originally translates to complete. And so perfect doesn't, you know, we think of perfect societally as, you know, without flaw, like getting everything just right. But really perfection is more about completion and being finished. And so none of us are finished yet. Like if we're still breathing and living, like we are all still in process. And so I think that's what I love about kintsugi, is because we're not having to hide any imperfections or any flaws or any failures, but they're part of the story. They're part of the history of the item. They're part of our history. And so you don't pick and choose and say, ooh, I'm just going to ignore that crack right there and leave that. Like you highlight every piece that is broken with gold because they're all part of the story. And then leaving that piece out is just a reminder that we're all still in process. You know, we're not finished yet. And that to me is not a shameful admission as much as a hopeful, like, yeah, we're all doing the best we can with the pieces we've been given. And yet we're all still in process. And that to me allows people to show up to a workshop table to be vulnerable and authentic instead of having to pretend, you know, everybody drops the pottery and it's kind of this like collective exhale, like, okay, we can just be as we are. We can come as we are. And that's okay. Because anybody who comes with their pristine piece of pottery, all we really know all they're doing is kind of turning the cracks towards the shadows and being like, it's all good here. And so, yeah, I think adding the gold is my favorite part.
Fair enough.
What if mine is the breaking?
The
What does
breaking
that
is also,
say?
the breaking is also fun.
Do you do a lot more breaking or a lot more like, do people bring you like sentimental pieces that have broken
Both.
on accident?
Both. Both. I probably, in order to get ready for like a show as big as St. James, I'm at this right now, I feel like I'm doing more breaking, making sure that I have enough inventory. But I do regularly get, you know, people reach out to me and say, you know, I had this piece that belonged to a loved one of mine, or this was my favorite fill in the blank, you know, it was my favorite flower pot and it broke, and I, you know, thought I was just going to throw it away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I've had the pieces forever. And then I heard somebody say, you know, you kintsugi that. And so I have kits to where if somebody wants to do the process themselves, they can do the process. Or some people just say like, no, I just want it repaired and then I'll repair it for them. Things of great sentimental value tend to be the things that people say, I want the 24 karat pure gold put on this, because they're going to be something they're keeping forever. But yeah. And I love to do all of them because it's either a story that I get, you know, beforehand, somebody brings me their piece to repair and there's always a story behind it. It's not just like this thing broke, can you fix it? There's always a story behind it. Or like I said, the pieces that I'm doing and I don't know where they're going to end up, kind of like to imagine like what might that story be? And often when people buy pieces from me, you know, it's always my great privilege if they share, you know, this, I'm giving this as a gift, or I thought this might be an encouragement to someone else, or, you know, I want this to commemorate whatever it is. So.
Do you ever name your pieces?
That is a really timely question because my answer up until this week would have been no. Never really thought about naming pieces until I found, okay, here, this is a good place to stop with imperfection and pause here because look, this is dripping because I added too much gold. So all I have to do is cotton ball, acetone, and then I'll just wipe that up and reapply it, okay? So even at this part of the process, you're not gonna mess it up. Like, again, it is about imperfection, but it also is beautiful. Like it's not imperfection and that's our excuse for it not looking great. But you're not going to get to a point of the process where you're going to mess it up suddenly. So no, I had not named pieces until recently. I found a huge vase. It was like this big and it looked like somebody had like painted primer on it, but never gotten around to painting the actual vase. And so I thought that'd be a great kintsugi vase. Like I'll just paint it a different color. I'll just paint it. They've already primed it for me. I'll paint it a different color. Well, then I noticed one part of the paint had chipped and it had this like really beautiful design under it. And so I took the razor blade and I started just scraping and it revealed this like black vase that was very vintagey and it had some gold, you know, floral designs on it. And it was really stunning. And so it probably took me a half a day just to meticulously scrape all this white layer of paint off and to reveal this beautiful vase, which then I had to exhale and drop because I wanted to kintsugi it and you can't kintsugi it I mean, an integrity. Sure, you could paint some lines on something, and that's what sometimes with not getting having a missing piece, somebody will say it's not really broken, or did you just paint lines on that? So when it's broken, I feel like people can really trust, even if it's put back together really well, they can trust. Okay, this is really broken. So I broke it and put it back together, and that was the first piece that I thought, I think I'm going to name this, and I have not come up with a name yet, but something along the lines of shedding and, like unveiling and uncovering, because there was this beautiful vase and someone had covered it up and thought it would look better, different than it was originally made. But then when you peeled those layers off, it really was quite exquisite the way that it was. And so as I was taking those layers off, I just thought, like, what things have I put on in the past that I thought would make me better or protect me, that have really just kind of acted as a barrier, and taking those layers off and shedding them to just really be comfortable in like the original. And so that one, I think I will have at St. James, and I just put 24 karat gold on that one because it meant so much to me. So it's a lot of gold because it's a big vase, but that one I think will get a name. So
You need a title.
I'll take suggestions from the audience afterward. So, yeah. The other part of Kintsugi is that it really does take your full focus. So this multitasking level is a little trickier. So it's taking me a little longer to apply gold.
But you have such a steady hand.
You do.
At the beginning of the day, yes. Sometimes you have to also pick like which part of the process is for that day. So if I've done a lot of kintsugi today, maybe by the end of the day I just break it. I just break it and I just leave it for the next day to restore it. And I'm sure there's a metaphor there. Just sometimes having to leave stuff.
It seems like some parts are pretty fast paced, like the breaking and the gluing of the epoxy and getting all those pieces together. You have to move pretty quickly. And then some of them you're like, let's take our
Be
time.
very meditative
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
it.
Very slow. So you can see this one, I think I've got all the lines on it, but there's definitely some touch up places that I'll go back once it dries and I'll kind of even the lines up. That's the other thing with the gold. If you end up with a thicker line than you want, you can always go back with a razor blade once it dries and you can scrape it down to get it a little thinner. But yeah, all in all, it is a process of patience. But also I think each piece kind of brings a challenge of like, I can do this. And so, yeah.
And you said the cure time for that is
So the cure time for the entire piece is going to be 24 hours.
Okay.
And it will just cure on its own. Now, to the person whose question was about the UV resin, that I believe would cure faster because you would put it under the UV light. But yeah, in general, I leave these for 24 hours. The paint itself will dry faster than that finishing layer. Now, if it's the food safe epoxies that I have found, those usually take 72 hours to cure.
Okay.
And so you want to make sure, again, that you read all your instructions because different manufacturers have different things. And then there's one last way that you can apply the gold, and that is on this piece. You can see this bowl. So like sometimes less is more. And so on this piece, this has got a lot of kintsugi stones in it, but the only thing that was broken was this was just a chipped bowl that I found. And so on this one, I used 24 karat gold, but instead of using the gold powder, I used gold leaf. And so you can see it's like a little bit more textured. But so you can do that. And then the other question I get asked frequently is, do you always use gold or platinum or silver? Like, is it always a metal? Can you ever use color? And actually, I just started doing what I've called color mending, to where it's almost an inverse, where instead of doing the gold on the cracks and then the pottery is colored, I've been taking white pottery and breaking it and then putting it back together. I think I have a piece over here too. Putting it back together with colored mica powder. And so on this one, you can see that it is put back together. This is a really dark blue, okay? It's almost like a navy. And the gold comes in that I take an entire piece and I actually am gilding that with 24 karat gold. So this is real gold, okay? And then I have different colors that I'll use for the actual cracks. And so you can see it just adds a totally different look to it. But I feel like it's not kintsugi if you don't have the gold somewhere. But what to me makes these special is that the entire piece is gilded in gold. And then you have a color. So my favorite color to do these in so far has been turquoise. But I've been doing like a lot of bold colors. So like a red, like a ruby, navies, deep emerald greens, turquoises, things like that. And so,
It's really fun.
the color
Yeah.
to these is really fun. So there you have it.
It's so beautiful.
Great.
Do we have any last questions? Yes.
Found that there are certain pottery types that are better, like terracotta versus traditional ceramic or the very fine ceramic. But could you do concrete?
Yeah. So I've done marble. I've done marble before. Terracotta is a nightmare, okay, because it crumbles. And so it does not work really well. I like any sort of glazed porcelain or ceramic. The issue you run into when you have matte ceramics is that any of the glue, any of the fingerprints, you can't always get it off really well. The epoxy will leave a stain. And so glazed is best because you can also take the razor blade and you're not scraping off any, actual finish.
That's
All
awesome, guys. I just want to, we're back. A huge thank you to Jillian Timberlake for sharing her craft with us. If you'd like to explore more, you can check out her books here at the library, or you can check her out online at beautifulybrokenky.com. Next time, we'll be highlighting the work of Maisie Clark, another incredible maker. So thanks to everyone who joined us and online and in the audience. And thank you so much, Jillian.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day. Keep making.
Bye.